Okay, we are live, you can start.
Olá, boa noite. Bem-vindos e bem-vindas a esta reunião aberta do Grupo de Contacto do LIVRE. Os membros e apoiantes do partido têm um link que lhes possibilita também a participação aqui em formato Jitsi, mas estamos a transmitir no YouTube e na página de YouTube do LIVRE, onde estamos a transmitir, podemos receber comentários que serão também depois formulados como perguntas para terem respostas durante esta nossa reunião. Vai ser uma reunião curtinha, estamos a pensar fazer 1 hora, mais ou menos até às 22h15. E sem grandes delongas, nós hoje temos uma convidada muito especial, é a Mélanie Vogel, que é co-presidente do Partido Verde Europeu, ou Partido dos Verdes Europeus, que é o partido no qual o LIVRE acabou de entrar há poucos dias como um membro de pleno direito. Eu, por acaso, tenho aqui ao meu lado, vi quando me sentei, que tinha aqui um artefacto histórico que é de antes do LIVRE, do nosso Manifesto para uma Esquerda do LIVRE, antes da fundação do partido. Lançámos em maio de 2012 e tinha um verso Rui Belo que dizia: chegava ao mês de maio, era tudo florido, e do outro lado, que aqui não se vê, dizia: e tudo é possível, era só querer. Na altura, uma das coisas que nós pensávamos que devia ser possível era Portugal ter uma representação autónoma no Partido Verde Europeu e, com isso, colmatando uma lacuna na política nacional que praticamente tem o tempo do nosso regime democrático. A democracia em Portugal e os partidos verdes europeus têm mais ou menos a mesma idade, são filhos dos anos 70, e até agora, apesar de algum caminho em conjunto, também tem havido alguns desencontros. Há um partido, membro do Partido Verde Europeu de longa data, o Partido Ecologista dos Verdes, mas com uma estratégia eleitoral autónoma, só agora passou a haver um partido de pleno direito, que é o LIVRE. Portanto, não é dizer que chegou o mês de maio e era tudo possível e era só querer, mas que demorou um bocadinho mais e aconteceu no mês de junho. Et maintenant, je passe au français, parce que, excusez-nous, on a un invité encore plus spécial. C'est Elias qui est venu, qui n'est pas encore en train de dormir. Tu ne vas pas dormir?
Boîte à histoire ne fonctionne.
La boîte à histoire ne marche pas. Ok. Donc, je vais présenter très rapidement Mélanie. Te souhaiter... voilà. Avec moi, maman. Te souhaiter les bienvenus et te remercier d'être ici avec nous du LIVRE. Ici, c'est 1h de moins. Mélanie est au centre de l'Europe, donc c'est déjà 10h15. José est aux Açores, c'est moins 1h. Et on va faire ici une conversation d'environ 1h. Esta conversa, como vocês veem, vai ser plurilingue e com tradução dinâmica. A maior parte das pessoas que queiram falar em inglês podem falar em inglês e a Mélanie responderá em inglês também, mas quando se sentirem mais à vontade a falar em francês podem fazê-lo, e aí resumiremos para o português. Quando se sentirem mais à vontade a falar em português podem também fazê-lo, e a Teresa Leitão fará um resumo interpretativo, digamos assim, para o francês. So, let's now jump into our third language of the night, which is English. That's going to be our lingua franca tonight. Melanie, so I already introduced you as the co-spokesperson of the European Greens. LIVRE is very happy to join the European Greens. I was saying that 10 years ago we launched the party with a verse from a Portuguese poem that said, in the month of May, everything was in bloom, in flower, and everything was possible. It was just a matter of wanting it. So we wanted a lot to join the European Greens. It took a little bit more than the month of May, so it was 10 years, and after that in the 2nd of June, but in the 3rd of June, we finally did it. And the first question for everyone that has just started listening to this conversation is, who are the European Greens? What is the history of this pan-European party? How does it work? A short introduction.
Okay,
Thanks a lot, Rui. And let me first say, because I think that's why we're here and that's why I'm talking to you tonight, that you are very happy to be now a full member of the EGP, the European Green Party, but we are also very, very happy to have welcomed you as a new member. That's, I will explain it later, but part of a strategy that we have for years to expand the Green family, and the joy is fully shared. The European Green Party was formally established in 2004, but the story of the European Greens is much older than this. Almost since the beginning of the European democracy and of direct elections to the European Parliament, Greens across Europe started to organize. We did something that was called the Federation of European Greens before European political party existed, because they didn't exist at first place. The fact that European political parties exist was also the result of political fights to build pan-European democracy, also to introduce it across member parties, across political parties at national level. So we started to coordinate in a federation much before we were actually established legally, with already the first group in the European Parliament in '84. It was not fully green. It was rainbow, full of different colors. And progressively, Greens across the EU also started to establish, and then the coordination between them became higher and higher. And finally, there was the possibility to create European Political Party. We did that in 2004. And since then, the legal framework evolved, and of course, we remained what is the European Green Party, with, I think, what makes us different, or maybe better than the other European political party, is that since the beginning, even if we always had very different national culture, political culture among the European countries, the European Greens were always very, very united. Of course, we have different political systems, so we have different strategies in elections, but when it comes to the values, to the position, to basically the objective, the world we want to live in, I think really we are the most united European political family. And that makes us stronger, because even if we were born as a small party, we were able to grow, but also to stay consistent, which is something that is now very important. You could see when the war exploded that all political family across the EU, they all had very deep inconsistencies. And when it comes to the Greens, I think it's really on values and on the project we stand for. We have always been very united. Maybe sometimes, if you live in Germany and you have a proportional system and it's very easy to make compromise, or if you live in France like me, where you don't have any proportional system and it's impossible to make compromise, the way you imagine to get to your goal is different, but the goal is the same. And that's a strength, and that's a strength that we didn't lose, and I'm very proud of it. We didn't lose it when we grew. Now we are in government in several EU member states. In some member states, we are still not so strong, and still with the diversity of this situation, I even think our unity increased, and I think that's a strength. When it comes to how big we are, what the organization is, with the Vienna Congress, when we welcome 4 new members, we are now 48 members across Europe, 30 in the European Union, and that's part of a strategy that we had for now 10 years. we see that the Green project is strong and solid in some member states, mostly in the north and in the west. And we wanted to expand it in the south and in the east, still consolidated what is in the west and in the north. And this campaign, and I'm sure we will come later to this, I think will be a test of this. Because if we want to have a successful campaign for the European election, we need to show that the parties that are in government, that are strong, that are there for years, that have a lot of members, the parties that are newer, they work together and they can grow together. And that's, yeah. And the fact that LIVRE joined in Vienna is also part of a will we had in the EGP to enlarge in the south and in the east. But also, of course, I don't know if this is like to what extent this is public or not, but we never, the EGP, because we are so, how to say that, we are really strong on values. We don't welcome any members like this. It's something that is always a long process. We get to know each other. We make sure that we share the same values, the same goal, that we can really work together. And other political parties just, do that very easily. They take a party, then they expel it, then they change. And we are slower sometimes, and we said it at the beginning. It takes maybe a little bit longer than for joining other European political party, but that's because we really take into consideration the consistency and the unity of the family. And the fact that you join is also a proof and a public proof of the fact that we are fully aligned on values, on the project, on the strategy, on how we see each other as political forces. And I'm very happy about it.
One of the things that I have to thank you guys for as a historian is that it's the first time that I have a Vienna Congress that I can like. But and that, of course, I have to thank not only Mélanie but also Thomas Weitz, who's the co-spokesperson, and he comes from the Austrian Green Party. So I'll pass the floor to
That was
Teresa.
the goal. That's why we did it in Vienna.
To greenwash the original Vienna Congress, exactly. So I'll pass the floor to Teresa for the second question. And Teresa Salomé, who's the co-spokesperson of LIVRE. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Hello, Mélanie. Thank you again for being with us. Contrary to Rui, I usually enjoy meetings in Vienna. And I like Vienna a lot. I'd like to ask you, what does it change for the European Green Party now that LIVRE is part of it? And also, what does it change for us? Is there any change? There are, of course, but can you tell us a little bit about that? And yes, how can we work, help, improve the work of the European Green Party? And the same, what can we expect from you? Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So as any organization, when you join it, and from both sides, there are rights and there are duties. So for you and for us as well, towards you. I think I'm going to start from the very general thing and then pin down to more concrete things. What it changed, the biggest important thing that it changed is that now you are officially, legally, formally recognized as a member of the European Green family. And that's something that is first a political message. You are in Portugal a full member of the European Green family, So you are, from a statutory point of view, in our family, for us, with equal rights than the German Greens, the French Greens, the Finnish Greens. You are full member of this family. And we recognize it like this. And of course, you are free to say it and to claim it as much as you like. But I think, yeah, there is a very political and symbolic thing. When it comes to what it changed for you, it means that you can claim this identity. It means that you can enjoy our shared resources and our common campaign, etc., etc. But it also means, especially now, because you joined, I think, at the most interesting moment. So I know Rui was a little bit too late, but still, I think it's really one of the most interesting moments to join the European Greens, because we are now starting to write the manifesto, to organize the common campaign. And from now on, you are a member of this organization, and for all the individual members of your party, because that's how it works, immediately when you're a member of LIVRE, you are a member of the EGP as individuals. And we are now in a moment where we are starting to, for example, write the manifesto. So you would be fully involved in this, but also to prepare our common campaign, so you can benefit from this. It means also you can tell us when you don't like something, you can contribute to stuff. And it means also very, very concrete stuff. Like you can now, for example, in European Green Party congresses, you can table resolutions, so you can yourself bring topics that you think the European Green Party should position itself on. Maybe that's something I should have said from the beginning when you asked the question, what is the EGP? But one of the things that European political parties are useful for is to unify positions. If we stay, each of us in our national context, we can have different positions. When we talk to each other, we manage to create a common line. And the EGP is a platform for this, to create common position, to talk to each other, and then to make sure that what we say everywhere in Europe, in Portugal, in Italy, in Spain, in Germany, in Sweden, is to the best extent we can unified. And this is the work that you are going to be able to contribute with democratic rights, with voting rights, with all the rights that full members enjoy. It also means that you have duties. For example, you need to stick to the values of the EGP. I have zero fear of this, but yeah, stuff like this. But it also means that we have duties towards you, to treat you equally, to make you participate to all our activities, to invite you to events that we organize, etc. Maybe there will be some more concrete questions, but I think for now that's more or less, yeah, broad picture of the story.
Rui, you're not listening to, we are not listening. Thank you, Mélanie, thank you.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
not listening, okay,
I'm not
doesn't
listening.
matter.
No, I was just saying a quick summary in Portuguese just about the two questions. A primeira pergunta foi sobre o que é o Partido Verde Europeu. Na verdade, o partido mais antigo, o Partido Pan-Europeu mais antigo, formalmente constituído em 2004. Antes disso, já com uma caminhada muito longa enquanto Federação dos Verdes Europeus, Grupo Arco-Íris no Parlamento Europeu, e inclusive com casos no Tribunal de Justiça da União Europeia, então Tribunal de Justiça das Comunidades, para reconhecimento desta nova entidade que é um partido político transnacional. E, portanto, o Partido Verde Europeu é, ao mesmo tempo, um sujeito da política europeia e um construtor da Europa democrática. Na segunda pergunta, que foi feita pela Teresa Salomé, tinha mais a ver com o que é que podemos esperar agora que o LIVRE é membro de pleno direito do Partido Verde Europeu, o que é que muda para o partido e o que é que muda para os membros do partido. E a resposta é que num partido que é provavelmente o partido mais unificado, com posições mais unificadas a nível europeu, sobre um acervo de temático que depois vamos explorar mais à frente, é participar na constituição dessas posições comuns, com direitos de voto, com direitos de voz, mas também, não só enquanto partido, mas também cada um de nós, os membros do LIVRE, são automaticamente membros do Partido Verde Europeu também, portanto, todos nós fomos também, passamos também a ser sujeitos nessa escala política europeia. Now, on to the next questions. I have Teresa. She has a raised hand. I was thinking now to go to two people who have been in the congresses, and Paulo as well, and Patricia. So I was thinking about giving the floor now to Paulo and Patricia, and then Teresa and someone else. Paulo and Patricia, they had a crucial role in this path towards membership of the European Green Party, because they have the portfolio of inter-party relations in the LIVRE Executive Committee, and they were also with me in the two last congresses before the Vienna Congress of the Greens, in Riga and then in Copenhagen. And so I will pass the floor to Paulo for a question, and then an answer by Mélanie, and then a question by Patricia, answer by Mélanie, and then on to Teresa Leitão, who's been very proactive in the creation of the of our new study center or think tank of LIVRE that we are working on, and that has had contacts with the European Green Foundation and also other foundations of the member parties of the Greens. So maybe when we get to Teresa, maybe we can amass 2 or 3 questions in each section, so that Mélanie can then answer together to 2 or 3 questions. But now to Paulo.
Thank you, Rui. Thank you, Mélanie, for joining us. It's a great pleasure, and we are indeed very, very happy to finally join the Green family that we always felt we were a part of. You mentioned that it's a very interesting time for us to join the EGP. So I would like to ask your thoughts about the politics of Europe right now. How are we going to the next European elections? How do you see things in the European context? How can the European Greens also play a role in the change that we so desperately need and want and have been working for?
Yeah. Yes. So indeed, I said that's probably the most interesting time to join the EGP, because I think, and I know it's something that, you always say before an election, these are the most important elections ever, but I kind of really think that's the case for the next European elections. And we are now in a situation in Europe, I think the situation is pretty clear. We see that there is an attempt from the Conservatives, who are a member together of the European Popular Party, the EPP, together sometimes with the Liberals, to join forces with the far right to kill social and climate policies at EU level. That's now the biggest danger that we have in Europe. It comes from a series of national elections where we saw this kind of majorities emerging in Italy. Of course, Hungary and Poland, but then Italy, Sweden, Finland. We don't know what's going to happen in Spain, but that's why the Spanish elections are so important. because that's a condition to keep or not a majority in the council for at least reasonable policies. And so that comes from national elections, but that also comes from what is going to be the next majority in the European Parliament, because we see that there is a part of the Conservative Party who would like, they are not all aligned on this. Not all EPP member party feel comfortable with this. But you have a growing number of parties inside of the EPP who think that it's better to govern with the far right than to try to find majorities with the democratic camp. And above this, that obviously puts in danger not only, you know, the majorities for each policies that we want, but also just the concept of having a European democracy. On top of this, we see that in the recent years, the populism of the far right has been targeted, of course, towards minorities, migrants, democracies, rule of law, fundamental rights, but in a growing way against climate policies. And it's not a coincidence if you have now the EPP, the Liberals, and the far right allying together in the European Parliament. I don't know to what extent this is known and to what extent people are conscious of the danger this represents. But these people aligned a few days, weeks ago in the European Parliament to kill the nature restoration law. And you see parties, political forces who used to be, you know, part of the history of the European Union, okay, with different political stances, but still playing the game of democratic majorities, allying with the fascists to kill climate policies and biodiversity protection. And this is very, very dangerous because we are at the moment where we know the climate crisis is hitting us and we have few years to react. It's hitting the most vulnerable first. And I think that's really something we have to be very, very clear on. At least for me, like we are Greens because we want social justice. We want justice. And that's why we know that we need to do green policies. We need to protect the climate because if we don't, the poorest, the most vulnerable are going to pay the price first. And in this context where it's so dangerous, and where we know that the climate crisis has never been bigger, with the war in Ukraine, the fundamental existence of the European project is endangered, and inflation, cost of energy due as well to non-climate action before is affecting the most vulnerable first. If we end up with a majority who wants to attack all of this, I don't know how we can, you know, just do politics in the general interest. I don't know how it's possible. So how to prevent that from happening? And that leads me to the second part of your question. What do the Green can do? When you know how the European Parliament works and how majority are built, I'm convinced that the biggest Green group possible is the key to maintaining a democratic, social, and environmental contract at EU level. And that's why we need to do this campaign with really with all our strength, thinking we need to be as big as possible with the biggest number, also from as many European countries as possible, because when you have a strong Green group in the European Parliament, we would have never had a Green Deal without the Green group in the European Parliament. Without 2019, the Green Wave, the climate movement, we wouldn't have had this big group. And without this group, forget about the Green Deal. But now still, they're attacking the Green Deal and they're attacking what is supposed to be the follow-up of the Green Deal. So the only way we have to prevent this deadly alliance is that this alliance is impossible. And how can it be impossible? Only with a strong green group in the European Parliament. That's how that's the spirit in which we are starting this campaign. We know that we have to consolidate the parties that are performing well or that performed well in the last elections, but we also need to expand. We need to have more representation from the south, from the east, not only to have few members in the European Parliament, but also to consolidate the green ideas and movement on the ground across the EU. That's why we are doing this. Not only to have one MEP more, but also to have a consolidation and structuration of the party and of the ideas on the ground. So that's it. The only way, I'm sorry, it's a little bit simplistic, but we have to be as big as possible. That's the only way to make it possible that we have in the next European Parliament a majority that can put social justice, climate policies, and the protection of democracy and fundamental rights at the heart. That's the only way.
Well, sorry, we have an intruder, so I will
It's
pass
okay.
on.
I like the intruder.
Hi, intruder. We will
Hello.
pass on directly to Patricia, and she'll ask also a follow-up question on this. Go ahead, Patricia, the floor is yours. Micro. Patricia?
Não se ouve, Patrícia. Não se ouve.
Ah.
Não. Deve ser um problema com os escutadores, porque o micro está ligado.
Okay. So, Patricia, let's try again.
Olá.
Okay. Go ahead.
It works.
Okay. Thank you. So I was just starting to congratulate you on our on a big congress and how wonderful it was to get into the European Green family in Vienna. Many thanks for being here with us and our supporters and members celebrating our entrance in the European Green family. It's very nice of you. I was hearing you talk about common grounds, and I remembered the debate we had in Vienna about just transition and how you gave us a very interesting perspective that the main goal was to fight for a fair society, and which makes possible to have environmental policies. Can you talk a little bit and bring us that debate and your perspective on that so we can share here with the others?
Yes, with pleasure. Indeed, we have identified that social issues would be key in the next campaign. And then, of course, the discussion we had in Vienna, we had many interesting discussions, but this discussion we are referring to was about what we call the just transition, and how, as Greens, we can convey in a proper way this message that, green transition is good for people. Because, of course, transition means change, and change means fear, and fear means I don't really like it. So that's always the question we have. How can we explain that, okay, change is coming anyway? It's just a matter of shaping it. If we don't shape it in the right way, it's going to be a disaster for mostly and firstly for the most vulnerable. But if we shape it, we have a way to build a better society. And what I said in this panel is something that I've been thinking a lot in the last months, because we are always, talking about the just transition in a way that I think, sometimes we tend to, because we are so much ahead, it's been years and years that we're thinking about why we need green policies, why we need to protect the climate and the ecosystem and biodiversity, etc. We know that we have to do it. And then we think, okay, but this could have a negative social impact. So we are going to say, oh, we also need social policies in order to make the green transition acceptable. So sometimes when we speak, it gives the impression that our goal is the green transition, and social policies are measures to mitigate the negative impact to make sure that the society can accept it. And I think we have to reverse this narrative, also because it's not true. The goal of the green transition is the social justice. This is why we're doing the green transition. We are not doing it for the ecosystem and the planet itself. The planet will be fine, I don't know, but the planet will survive us. We are doing this because we know that if we don't do it, it's going to be the most horrible situation, first and foremost, for the most vulnerable. That's why we need the green transition. It's the goal is social justice. The tool is the green transition. And from when I think you reverse this argument, you can maybe start speaking about measures in a different way. And instead of saying, okay, we're going to have green transition in the sectors, blah, 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 and then measures that people in their daily life, they don't really understand what it means because they don't really, what they hear is, okay, some jobs are going to disappear, am I going to keep my job? Like, when I talk to people who are scared about what is going to happen, that's it. And I think instead of saying, yeah, so we need very like meta level policies to transition between this kind of economy to this kind of economy with very academic concepts, and then very academic concept to explain to them why it's going to be fair for them. I think we need to start from to make it attractive to people. We have to start with things that are going to be beneficial for them. And I gave this example of a measure. I mean, it's one among different ones that we can campaign for, advocate for. But I was the rapporteur in the Senate on a mission that was called Green Social Security. So it was about how to adapt our social security system to make them resilient to climate change, but also to make them a part of the solution. And we ended up with a recommendation to create a universal allowance to get access to healthy food. I don't know what is a good translation to this. This is a tool that everybody understands. If this is created, I'm going to get an allowance to have access to healthy food every month. And that's the goal, to reduce social injustice, to improve public health. And then with this, you decrease diseases, you also accelerate the agricultural transition. But yeah, I just think it would be important to shift the narrative. Instead of saying the goal is the climate and social policies are a tool to get to this goal, to say the goal is social justice and the tool is the climate policy.
Very well.
Thanks.
So I think these two questions really blended in nicely, one and the other. Let me just emphasize a point here that we do have a change in the force correlation in Europe, where the far right has quit on trying to quitting Europe. So their goal is no longer destroying the EU or the European project. They have engaged in a certain kind of a mutation. And this, for instance, so Orban was very influential in this. Their goal is to control policies at the European level, no longer to, follow Brexit with an Ital-exit or a Hexit, Pole-exit, etc. And this was always a possibility. This was always in the realm of possibilities because, of course, the natural reactionary drive to centralization and authoritarianism can react in the way that happened with the right wing, with the reactionaries in the United States. Back in the 50s and the 60s, they were for states' rights against the federal government. But when they do have federal power, then they are for, military might and authoritarianism at the federal level. So I think that the European far right has done more or less the same shift. And because they are very pragmatic, they easily join forces with the EPP and the Liberals. And this leaves us, progressives, in a very tough spot. Because a part of the progressive left doesn't want to make politics at the European level. They still are not convinced that building an European democracy is possible. And that leaves us at a distinct disadvantage towards the pragmatism with which the right wing unites. Part of the answer is in the second question, the question that Patricia put to Mélanie, and the answer that Mélanie gave, which is we do not only need to say how terrible the right wing austerity, authoritarianism are, but we need to have our own, as I usually call them, objects of political desire to persuade people to join the progressive camp. And that can be on food, that can be on renewal of houses, housing renovation, that can be on studies and qualifications and personal growth, that can be on green jobs, that can be on several topics where the Greens have been at the forefront. Maybe I should have summarized this in Portuguese rather than in English, but
it was not a summary. You added to what
I added to the debate, so it's okay in English.
So you have to summarize me and yourself now.
We will do another summary later on, but now I want to pass the floor to Teresa, and because I have no new show of hands, I'm gonna pick up some volunteers. So José Azevedo from the Azores afterwards. From the Azores, is from the National Executive Committee of LIVRE, but he's joining us from the Azores, which is one of our territorial, local committees that we've been most proud of since the beginning, with a very important ecological outlook. And then I'm looking for other people who want to join in, or if someone is controlling the social networks and the YouTube channel, can pick up questions for us to put to Mélanie. We are, in the almost arriving at the last quarter of our debate. We are going to end at about 10:15. So, Teresa, your turn now, and then José.
Oui, je passo ao français, mas eu gostava de dar a minha vez a pessoas que não estiveram em Viena. Portanto, Bernardo, Luís, Rui.
Não faz mal, Teresa. De qualquer forma, o pessoal pode inscrever-se, envia mensagem pelo chat ou levanta a mãozinha e, portanto, podes fazer a tua pergunta agora.
Une question très courte. Merci Mélanie d'être avec nous tout de suite après le congrès. Tu n'as même pas eu le temps de te reposer.
J'ai renoncé au repos il y a longtemps.
Oui, je comprends. Oui, bon, on s'achemine vers la campagne des européennes. C'est pas demain, c'est après-demain. Et comme partout au Portugal, lors de la campagne des européennes, on parle de tout sauf de l'Europe. Le LIVRE est le seul parti en fait qui parle de l'Europe lors des campagnes pour les européennes. Les Portugais n'ont pas besoin d'être convaincus que l'Europe est utile pour nous, parce qu'ils savent que c'est de l'Europe que vient l'argent, mais donc on se pose toujours en bénéficiaire. Et je voulais te demander si, pour vous qui êtes au centre de l'Europe, là où les choses normalement se passent, comment vous voyez, donc nous savons ce que nous avons à recevoir de l'Europe, mais comment vous voyez la spécificité de notre contribution pour l'Europe en tant que pays périphérique et du Sud?
Okay. Shall I answer in English?
Comme tu veux,
Yes,
Mélanie.
of course. Yeah, you answer in English, yes.
Peut-être on peut ajouter d'autres questions. Je ne sais pas si José veut tout de suite faire la sienne. Sinon...
Sim, sim, posso fazer.
Vais fazer em português, inglês?
Vou fazer em inglês. O meu francês está muito enferrujado. So, Mélanie...
Alors, José fera sa question en anglais et après, donc, tu réponds aux deux questions en même temps.
Yes, okay. So I could add some to the question made by Teresa, which is looking from this ultra-peripheric region like the Azores, and having the perception that that we need to a shift in politics and a shift in economics towards sustainability, towards justice, social justice. We see from the Azores, we see a shift in between the rhetoric and the actions. And this is particularly visible here in the Azores, where we sell the idea of a region which is very green and very ecological. But on the other hand, what we see on a daily basis is the dismantling of both the whatever good we have in terms of biodiversity. We see the promotion of an agriculture which is more and more intensive. We see an expansion of mass tourism, and so coming in the running up to the elections, what message? How could we say that the elections will make a difference? I mean, how can we convince people that no, this time change is going to happen?
Mélanie, you can answer, and then I have a short question from YouTube who arrived, but after your answer, I will ask this one for also a short answer. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I think both questions are very interlinked, so I think I'm going to answer in one. So the first remark I wanted to make, when you talk about the periphery of Europe, I think we are in a moment now, and we should not underestimate that, where the destruction of European democracy can come from the center. It can come from France. It can come from, so it's not the case that, we have a stable center, historical founding members of the EU that are sticking to the values that are the basis of the European project, and then other member states who join later who are less attached to it. It could even be the opposite. We have now Italy. I don't know what's going to happen in 2027 in France. So we have in the biggest, you see the AfD in Germany. I mean, yeah. So we have in the center of the Union some scary development when it comes to the commitment to our common values and to rule of law, basically. So when it comes to, when you see this, you see that, the role of so many other member states, sorry, I'm too much into EGP stuff, it's so big especially in the coming years, because, for example, the national elections in Spain, they're happening in a few weeks. I mean, this is going, if we lose Spain up until the elections in Poland, so you might consider that those two countries are not the center, this is the condition to keep or not to keep a majority in the council for, I'm not even saying progressive, but just, reasonable democratic majorities. So I think the solution could even this time come from what you call the periphery, because right now we are in a moment where the center is sucking it so much, to be not so polite. But then when it comes to what is the message that you can bring or that to the campaign, why people need to vote for the Greens, etc. I mean, it's obvious that climate change, inflation, this is not affecting us equally. That's obvious. And you talked about mass tourism, and of course, this is something that is affecting some member states and not others. And that's, I think, it has to be, and that's also the. I mean, that's one of the thing that you can bring in the campaign, and that we need as EGP to, you know, absorb and become better at, to represent these challenges from the south, from the east, that are different. But when it comes to the south, for example, the drought in Spain, the destruction of biodiversity because of mass tourism, housing, electricity prices, that these are topics that we cannot. I don't believe in politics that you can bring topics just because you talk about them. You bring topics into a campaign because the people for whom these topics matter are with you. So the concerns of the South are not going to be as represented as we would want in the Greens campaign if you are not with us. So that's why we need you, and you need us, you know. So that's why we are family, basically. That, I hope I more or less answered. I think you are muted, Rui, or I cannot hear you.
I was saying obrigado, Mélanie, and now for the promised summary in Portuguese, really quick. Então, duas perguntas, uma sobre, muitíssimo resumido, sobre qual é o contributo que podemos dar a partir do sul e da fachada atlântica, da periferia, para os verdes e a política europeia, e o José Azevedo, já nem na fachada atlântica, mas para lá da fachada atlântica, mesmo no meio do Atlântico, um diagnóstico de pressões ecológicas, agrícolas e outras às quais é preciso dar resposta, e a Mélanie dizendo que, na verdade, uma boa parte da resposta pode precisamente vir de países como Portugal. Deixa-me acrescentar que uma coisa que sempre gostei bastante nos verdes europeus é que, apesar de terem durante muito tempo tido partidos fortes, alemães e franceses, nunca ficaram resumidos naquele mito do motor ou do eixo franco-alemão. E a Mélanie deu como dois exemplos essenciais para o futuro da política europeia a curto prazo, o que vai acontecer em Espanha já no mês que vem, e o que irá acontecer na Polónia no ano que vem. Mélanie, I have 3 questions that came from YouTube. They are quick questions for maybe quick answers. And then we have Bernardo Marta for an intervention here after this. So I'll maybe put 2 of the questions, then Bernardo, and then the other one, and we are quickly approaching the end. So first question from YouTube. With so many political parties on the left, it becomes hard to justify to other people why they should vote for a Green Party instead of other more traditional left-wing parties. How can we change minds?
You want to answer directly?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there is something very simple that you can just see in reality. There is no green policy without the Greens. The reason why left party starts now realizing that, yes, it is important to talk about green policies, it's because the green exists. And I'm happy about that. I'm happy about the fact that more and more political parties and the society in general is getting more aware of the climate crisis and why it's so important. But I really believe that how can I say it? The software on where is the the political project of all political forces, apart from the Greens, even when they talk about green stuff, if they don't change their, we say in French, logiciel, so the way that the way they see how society should work, it's not going to produce a society that respects planet boundaries. You cannot just take the program of the liberals and add some green chapter. You cannot take the program, a productivist, growist program of communists and add some green chapter. It doesn't work, because then if you don't change how the economy works radically, then you are not going to change the system. And it's a positive thing, and I don't want to undermine it, it's a positive thing that a lot of left parties, and it's also the case in France, it's also the case in a lot of member states, start realizing that the big social question is the climate question. And then they start realizing that they should have an answer to this. But they haven't have the revolution to really change what they propose. So most of the time they propose what they were saying with some climate, biodiversity thing on top of it. And that's already good. We are leading somewhere, but I think it's just a fact. There is no, I don't know an example in the world of green policies that happened without strong Greens. So that's just a fact.
Very good. So I'll jump one question, because the other one I think is related to the first, and it follows. I would like to ask, why does the Green Group in the European Parliament sit on the right of the socialists? And if it would make more sense for a group that defends radical ideas like degrowth to symbolically be further left. I have to add that LIVRE in Portugal sits to the left of the socialists. So this is a question that is also of interest to us.
Yes. Yes. To be honest, I have no clue how this happened and how that was decided. But just FYI, for your information, in the French Senate where I sit, we sit on the left of the socialists. We sit between the socialists and the communists.
Very well, like LIVRE in Portugal. So now you have one more vote to change this when this comes to a vote. Bernardo, you're next. Let's try and keep it short, because I have your question, then another one, which is not a simple one from YouTube. I warn you ahead of time, and then I want to say something in the very end, and we have to let Mélanie also have a rest.
Sleep.
Bernardo.
Hello all, hello Mélanie. Thank you very much for being here with us. It's a pleasure. So my question is this one. Climate change is a very serious threat to human life, and far right is a very serious threat to democracy, and especially to minorities. So I believe that the best way to fight these kind of fears is with hope. But how can we leverage the hope of the people, the hope of Europeans, to dream about the future? I believe that green jobs are a very good way to do that, but they are not enough. We need to be very optimistic. And how can we tell the Europeans to be optimistic with us to fight these very serious challenges? Thank you.
Bernardo, let me add the question that we had from YouTube, so we'll spare a little bit of time, and it is related. It's maybe more difficult than the one that Bernardo has made, because it's, I would like to ask why, no. What's the real opinion about nuclear energy of the Green Group? Because Bernardo was about
that's easy.
Okay.
Okay. No, I mean, the first question, the question you ask is basically the question that we are asking ourselves every day in the EGP. You know, that's the question you ask is basically how to win the campaign. So I'm not going to tell you that I'm 100% sure that I have the answer, because if we had that, probably the Greens would be 51% in the European Parliament and everywhere in Europe. But where I agree with some lines that you started to describe is that I think we are in a weird situation where we, the Greens, we started to, we were born in the 70s, 80s with as whistleblowers, really saying, okay, if we don't change what we are doing today, in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, it's going to be terrible. And people were like, okay, now, it's bad because we're not listened. We didn't do the green transition when we had to do it 40 years ago. So now we are there. But it's a little bit the paradox of, it's the paradox of prevention. It's very difficult to convince people to do things when they don't see concretely that there is a problem. So for example, in sociology, there is always this example, and because I worked on social security, we talked a lot about it. A good doctor that basically makes you never sick because they can identify little problems and then advise you, and then you are never sick. You're never going to think that this person helped you. But if you get really sick and you have a cancer and you're scared of dying, and then you get a treatment and then you're saved, then you're going to think, okay, this person saved me. And that's why it's so, and that's a little bit the same with politics. It's difficult to convince people to go for measures where they don't see what we are talking about. And now we are coming to a moment where, paradoxically, maybe because we were not heard, we can manage to get majorities now, but it's a little bit like it's yes or no. So either we manage to convince people that there is a positive alternative where they feel represented, they feel my life with them is going to be better. It's going to be good. It's going to be a good life. And that's about green job. That's also about different things, about living in peace, about living in security. Either we are able to produce this positive, and Rui was talking about, you said, object of political desire. I like this expression. I mean, yes, we need to be a positive project where people are like, yes, I like that. And not only I do that because I'm fucking scared of this. That's not the only drive to vote. Either we manage to do that, or indeed, it's the opposite that is going to happen. And I think to make it possible, we need to campaign. Yes, we need to, of course, we need to explain why what the others are doing, it would be a disaster. But I believe in positive campaign. I believe in campaign for a project. You need to show people that you have a plan that works, that is going to improve their life. And because we are now in a situation where climate change has started to worsen people's lives concretely, like it's not something that is going to happen in 40 years. It's something that is happening right now. It's something that you cannot pay your bill because we made ourselves dependent on Putin's gas. You cannot let your children play outside because it's so hot, because we didn't, so this is now very concrete. So I think we are now or never in a situation where people want some change. It's just a matter of convincing them that the change you're proposing them is going to be better than the one of falling back to nationalist and identity, blah, blah, blah. And this we will manage if we are good. I mean, it's, it's not like in politics, you don't have a magic formula but yes, I think it's with campaigning on positive, concrete measures that people see, okay, this is going to improve my life. And when it comes to the position of the Green Group in the European Parliament on nuclear, I mean, it's pretty simple. We don't think that nuclear is an energy of the future. I mean, it's actually, and I mean, I'm French, so situations are different from countries to countries. But I can tell you that in France, the reason why France is the only country in the European Union that is not meeting its renewable targets, it's because of the investment in nuclear, because it's pumping all the investment, public investment, for technology that, may, because in France we're in a situation where our power plants are very old, so they cannot continue for much longer. So we have the choice now, either we invest on renewables or we reinvest in nuclear. And it's so expensive, and we don't even know if it's going to work, and we don't even know when. Not even talking about security issues, safety issues. We think the target is 100% renewable Europe. That's the only way to make us independent, to have the cheapest energy possible, the safest energy possible, that is manageable by citizens. And yes, so then the transition towards this, you can have different opinions, the speed, which power plant you should, but the goal we are very united on is 100% renewable.
Very well. So let's come to an end. There's only one last question that I will combine with my last idea. The question is, how do we fight both the huge amount of incoming text, audio, video misinformation, and the inevitable job and income loss that is arising from AI? Let me just leave.
I'm happy that you answered this one.
Okay, no, I was here. I had the sound on for a while, and I got an idea, the old-fashioned way, not through the internet, but from the next room. And the idea is actually an idea that combines several of the strands that we were speaking about. How to fight far-right authoritarianism, what can LIVRE give to the European Greens, what solutions can come from a country like Portugal to European politics. And the idea goes like this. Next year, we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Carnation Revolution in Portugal, our democratic revolution. It will be a couple of months before the European Parliament elections. And of course, we have all these changes that are very challenging, from the structural transformation of the of the global public sphere. So people need practical guidance. There's no science about fighting the far right, but sometimes there are very good practical examples. People need facts to answer to the misinformation. People need also ideas on how to provide an alternative. So what about, of course, the European Greens will have a manifesto for the European elections. There will be a policy program. But what about a handbook of progressive arguments, green arguments against far-right authoritarianism and misinformation? And that will be something that we can all work on, and that we can produce also in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Carnation Revolution. The 70s were also a very, very fraught and anxious decade. Well, I remember because I was born then. But the Portuguese Revolution was actually one of those moments when, everybody started receiving these images coming from Lisbon, where people were putting flowers on rifles. Kids were playing in the streets with soldiers that were overthrowing a dictatorship. And it really did set upon a new wave for democracy, the so-called third wave of democratization. So maybe let's end with this, positive idea that that's probably a good role for the South in these upcoming European elections. So let's thank Mélanie for this very good conversation that we've had. This will be one of the first of many conversations that I'm sure we will have with our Green family. It was almost a celebratory conversation just 3 or 4 days after the Vienna Congress, the good Vienna Congress. The first one was very reactionary. This will be more progressive. Bye, everybody. Au revoir and goodbye, as our
Thank
old
you.
dog in the Eurovision contest used to say. Bye, Mélanie. Merci
All
beaucoup.
right. Thank you,
Bye,
Mélanie.
merci.
Bye.
Good night.
Merci.
Bye.
Ciao.
Well,